People think cheating happens by accident. It doesn't. It's planned in half-truths and good intentions. My name's Elena, 38. I teach literature at a small university on the coast, the kind of place where the sea air makes everything feel temporary. I tell my students stories about moral conflict, about temptation, about the quiet ways people destroy what they love. But I've lived a better one than I've ever taught. My husband, Tom, is a software engineer. Predictable, kind, gentle. He's what I used to call safe ground. David was the opposite. 42, married, father of 2, a visiting lecturer who spoke like everything he said was a confession. Brilliant, distracted, the kind of sadness that feels like an invitation if you stare too long. When colleagues asked why we spent so much time together, I said, "He's going through a divorce. I'm helping him." That was my first lie. Not to them, to myself. I told myself it was compassion, but compassion was just attraction pretending to have manners. I lied to everyone, including myself. The hardest part wasn't the guilt. It was how easy it became. My marriage to Tom was steady in the way most comfortable things are. Predictable, soft around the edges, quiet enough to echo. We ate early dinners, talked about work in bullet points, and watched the same shows until they blurred together. Our weekends were rituals of routine, errands, groceries, the same cafe every Sunday morning. We didn't argue. We just moved through life like dancers who had memorized the steps but forgotten the music. At home, I lived among tidy surfaces and alphabetized books, the illusion of control disguised as taste. The air always smelled faintly of candle wax and predictability. Then there was David. He arrived at the university for a semester-long fellowship. Brilliant, distracted, eyes that carried too many thoughts and not enough sleep. In meetings, he spoke like someone trying to solve a riddle no one else could hear. At first, we talked about literature, then philosophy, then nothing that belonged in a classroom. Coffee breaks turned into long walks turned into late nights of conversation we pretended were academic. He told me his wife was angry all the time. I told him I admired loyalty. We both lied politely. There was no sudden spark, just small recognitions, shared glances over books, an accidental brush of hands when we reached for the same pen. The language of restraint is its own kind of intimacy. By the time I realized how close we'd become, it was too late to name it anything other than what it was. Loneliness disguised as understanding. And in that quiet, carefully curated life of mine, even silence started to sound like temptation. My marriage to Tom was steady, the kind of predictable rhythm people call security, until they realize it's just choreography. Early dinners, quiet weekends, shared routines so rehearsed we could have lived them blindfolded. He was gentle, structured, always home by 6. We watched the same shows, ate the same meals, laughed at the same jokes we'd been telling for years. There was no chaos, no passion either. Just the calm of 2 people who'd stopped surprising each other. Our house smelled faintly of coffee and predictability. My books lined every wall, fiction stacked beside philosophy, each spine straight, each story in its place. I thought that order meant happiness. Then David arrived. He was the visiting lecturer assigned to share my course on modern ethics. At first, it was professional, collaborative lesson plans, coffee breaks that bled into longer conversations about literature and life. He had that rare quality, presence. He looked at people like he was listening to every unsaid thing. He told me his wife was angry all the time. I told him I admired loyalty. We both lied politely. It started with small indulgences, sharing papers after hours, lingering too long by the office window, hands brushing when we passed each other a folder. Emails came next, short, harmless notes about assignments and research, except they weren't harmless. Each one said something we weren't ready to admit out loud. He understood me in a way Tom never did. Not because Tom couldn't, but because I'd stopped giving him the chance. I mistook recognition for destiny. By the time we kissed, the betrayal had already begun. Not with touch, but with empathy. Tom and I met in graduate school. 2 cautious people sitting in the back of a seminar, pretending we had nothing to prove. He loved logic, I loved order. Together, we built a life that was more equation than poem. Our marriage came quietly. No grand gestures, no chaos. Just the calm certainty that comes from choosing someone who makes sense. Our careers grew in parallel, neat and respectable. He joined a software firm. I started teaching full-time. We bought a modest house by the sea. Sunlight, quiet neighbors, a life that looked exactly how it was supposed to. It wasn't passion that held us together. It was the absence of reason to leave. One night, I asked if he believed people could love twice. He said, "Once should be enough, if you're honest." He was right. I just wasn't ready to test it. Then came David. Everything. Tom wasn't. Disheveled brilliance, unbuttoned certainty, the kind of man who talked about failure like it was an art form. Loving him felt like standing too close to the edge of something. Dangerous, visible, alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't the wife who behaved. I was someone unscripted. I didn't cheat because I lacked love. I cheated because I wanted to feel like a story again. It happened on a Thursday evening during a thunderstorm that swallowed the campus in silver noise. David's seminar ran long. Students trickled out until it was just us. The echo of rain against the windows, fluorescent lights buzzing like they were holding their breath. He was packing up his notes when he said, "You didn't have to stay." "I know," I said. He smiled, reached for a stack of papers, and his hand brushed mine. It wasn't romantic. It was electric. A jolt through the quiet we'd built between us. When you spend too long craving restraint, touch feels like rebellion. We didn't speak after that. We just moved. Slow, inevitable, deliberate. His office was dark except for the desk lamp. It wasn't planned, only rehearsed by silence. Afterward, I drove home in the rain, wiped my lipstick at red lights, rehearsed normality in the mirror. Tom was asleep when I got in, his breathing steady, the kind of peace I'd just abandoned. Guilt doesn't feel heavy at first, it feels efficient. The weeks that followed became choreography. Coffee breaks that turned into excuses, hotel rooms under the guise of conferences, weekends spent inventing professional obligations. Then one morning I found an earring in his car. Not mine. He said it was his wife's. I believed him. Or rather, I chose to. You learn quickly that liars are good listeners, especially when the lie is yours too. A month later, a letter arrived at the university. Thick paper, my full title written in careful script. Dr. Elena Harper, private and confidential. I assumed it was work. Funding, maybe. Conference correspondence. I opened it at my desk, coffee cooling beside a stack of essays. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the ink precise, deliberate. "You don't know me, but I know about you and David. I'm his wife. I found your emails. I'm not angry. I just wanted to tell you he's not leaving me. I thought you should hear the truth from someone who still loves him." I read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition might change the meaning. The handwriting was steady. The tone, heartbreak wrapped in composure. I'd expected rage. What I got was pity. That evening I met David at the cafe near campus. I slid the letter across the table. He didn't read it all the way through. He just sighed and said, "She's unstable. I'll handle it." But I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes, not loss. He wasn't worried about her. He was worried about exposure. On the walk home, the rain started again. The same kind of storm that had started it all. The next day, another envelope waited on my doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside, one line, handwritten in unfamiliar ink. "You're not the first." No signature, no explanation. And maybe that was the point. A stranger's handwriting told me more about my affair than the man who caused it. I didn't leave him that day. I just stopped believing the story I was telling myself. I stopped meeting David, stopped replying to his messages. Instead, I went home earlier, cooked dinner, folded laundry, and tried to atone through routine, as if order could disinfect guilt. Tom noticed, of course. The quiet, the sudden effort. "You work too much?" he said one night, brushing my hair from my face. "You need rest." I wanted to tell him everything right then, to hand him the truth before it found him first. But confession requires courage, and I'd spent all of mine on deceit. Then one evening, he found the letter, the one from David's wife. It was sitting on my desk, unfolded, waiting, like it had been tired of hiding. He read it without a word, his hands steady at first, then trembling just enough to make the paper shake. When he finally looked up, his voice was quiet. "Is it true?" I nodded, didn't beg, didn't explain. He swallowed hard. "Was he worth it?" "No," I said, "but I wanted to be." He didn't speak again. He just walked to the bedroom, pulled a small suitcase from under the bed, and began to pack. No shouting, no accusations, just the slow, mechanical sound of a zipper closing around a life. I watched him leave, the front door closing with a softness I didn't deserve. Then I sat on the floor until morning, the silence heavier than any argument could have been. 2 days later, another message appeared in my inbox. From her, he told me he ended things. "Please don't contact him again. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope you understand what you almost ruined." I stared at the words for a long time, my reflection faint in the laptop screen. She thought she was saving her marriage. She didn't realize she was saving me too. I moved out of the house, sold the view of the sea I'd once mistaken for serenity, and rented a small studio near the university. My reputation survived untouched. No one knew. Not my colleagues, not my students. Only 3 people carried the truth: Tom, David, and his wife. I went back to teaching, lecturing on moral literature, on consequence, on the small human tragedies that unfold when people confuse desire for destiny. I told my students that guilt is just memory with a heartbeat. They nodded, thinking I was quoting someone wiser. One afternoon, a package arrived at my office. No return address. Inside was a first-edition copy of Anna Karenina. On the title page, an inscription in graceful handwriting: "For the woman who reminded me that tragedy has many authors." I didn't need a signature. I knew. It was from her, the stranger who had every right to hate me and somehow chose grace instead. I ran my fingers over the paper, the ink slightly indented, as if even forgiveness left an impression. A few days later, a colleague mentioned that David had resigned suddenly. Health reasons, they said. I never reached out, never asked what that meant. Some stories don't need endings. They just need distance. It's strange how silence can sound like peace when you've lost the right to speak. The wife gave me a book. I gave her my absence. It was the fairest trade either of us ever made. David went back to his wife. Of course he did. Men like him always return to the place that forgives them loudest. And Tom, he didn't want me back. He was kind about it, which almost hurt more. He said he'd always care, but some stories just stopped making sense halfway through. So we let ours end mid-sentence. Life didn't collapse dramatically after that. It simply shrank. Lectures, grocery lists, empty evenings. I filled the silence with grading papers and drinking too much coffee. In class, I rewrote my syllabus, added a new unit, ethics and desire in literature. I told my students that every affair begins as a philosophy, the idea that you deserve to feel something more. They took notes like it was theory. I didn't tell them it was autobiography. Sometimes when I see couples walking across campus, I imagine the invisible outlines of all the mistakes that keep them together. David rebuilt his marriage. Tom rebuilt his peace. And I rebuilt nothing. I just kept living inside the space between what I wanted and what I destroyed. I used to think love was a lesson. Now I know it's a syllabus you can't finish. The kind that ends with 2 people passing, and one left repeating the course alone.